Hey, Ami.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
What time is it in Texas?
It is 10:30 in the morning.
Oh, yeah, I totally forgot about the time shift when we were lining this up.
No problem, no problem. I still have my coffee, so
Yeah, I just finished. I ate early lunch, but it didn't mess you up the time.
no.
Okay. So, Ami, can you tell the viewers who you are?
Yeah, my name is Ami Kamara, and I am the museum manager for the Fire Museum of Texas in Beaumont, Texas. Um, I also serve as the president of the Southeast Texas Museum Association, which is a regional association. And then I am on council for the Texas Association of Museums. And I've been in this position at the Fire Museum for about 8 years.
In Beaumont.
Yes,
Where on the map like is Beaumont for
we are closer to Louisiana than we are to any other place in Texas, basically.
Oh, wow.
So we're about 25, 30 miles from the Louisiana border. But if you're in Houston, most people know where Houston is. We are almost as far east from Houston as you can get and still stay in Texas.
So, in terms of influence and culture and that sort of thing, is there more of that influence from Louisiana in your area, or?
Yes, yes. I grew up in West Texas and then went to grad school in Austin, Texas. I lived for a short while in the Panhandle in Amarillo, and all of those kind of felt like Texas. And when I moved here, it was culture shock. I thought I was in a whole different country. I was like,
Really?
not Texas, but it's fun. The food is good. I gained like 35 pounds after moving here, so. But it definitely has a very strong Louisiana influence. But that's the fun part about it.
Where did you go to grad school?
UT Austin.
Wow. And what did you study there? Twice.
Art history. Art history.
Art history.
Yes.
What was your passion or specialty there with?
Actually, civil rights movement photography. So I was obsessed. My undergrad degrees were in art history and in history. And so I kind of try to combine both of those with my art history graduate school degree. And I was still probably am obsessed with the civil rights movement in the United States. And I really looked at the photographs and stuff like that, and how they helped kind of galvanize the movement from the first photograph of Emmett Till's body in his casket, all the way through, photographs that were used in Life magazine and that kind of stuff. So
Wow.
I
Yeah,
love
you hear about was it Brady during the Civil War, the photographer,
it. Yeah.
and how it sort of galvanized the country around the movement and the Civil War, and
Yeah.
maybe there's parallels there with the civil rights
Yeah.
movement.
The little issue with Brady is it was found later that he posed a lot of his photographs.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of his images, while the dead bodies were dead bodies, on the fields, he liked to make them into a better looking composition for what he thought was a better looking composition. So
Okay.
little,
Yeah.
civil rights movement photography was a little less posed because a lot of it was just photojournalism. Um,
Okay.
that was, it wasn't really art photography.
Wow. So you just delved right into all that in school.
It was fun stuff.
That is really cool. So did you go through a typical 2-year program, or did you have longer to go with your different specialties in grad
It was
school?
a 2-year program. Took me a little bit longer to finish, but because of writing my thesis, but it was a 2-year program. It just,
Yeah.
I think I finished up my thesis and stuff like that, like the following year. So
What was some of the things you explored in your thesis?
Civil rights movement photographs. I looked at the works of Flip Shelby and Charles Moore, who were photographers for Life magazine, and so it was that was kind of what I looked at and what I sort of delved into with my thesis. And that wasn't at the time when I was at UT. There was a lot of emphasis. I don't know what it's like now, but there was a lot of emphasis on ancient cultures, ancient art. I mean, I think the most recent art we studied was like Renaissance. So it just wasn't there was no modern classes at all, and so which kind of hindered my thesis because I kept having to go outside of the department to get assistance. So I would have to go to like the communications department because I was working so much with photography. And I mean, most of the art we studied, the camera hadn't even been invented yet. So
Wow. Did you or do you have photography as a hobby, or did you
yes,
ever?
yes, I always say in my past life I was a photographer. So what that means is when I first started out, like out of high school and all that kind of stuff, after I went through like 4 different degree plans, I kind of settled on photography. And I had this idea I was going to be like a National Geographic photographer. And then I was married. I married really young, and my husband and we ended up pregnant. And I remember I was really upset because I was like, I can't have a baby and be a worldwide photographer. Like it won't happen, you know? And so, but my son is like the best thing to ever happen to me. So, and my photography teacher once told me, he said, that is the most photographed child in the world. And he's probably right. But he's 19 now. But when we got kind of stuck in the house during quarantine, I really started getting back into kind of my photography roots. And I would wake him up and I'd be like, the light's perfect. I need you to go sit outside. Put on that shirt that, and I would have all this stuff. And I mean, God bless him. He's 18 years old and he's still posing for his mom with the promise of Starbucks. So like if you do this for me, I'll go get you Starbucks. So yeah, he has been a willing, a long suffering model for me.
Did you when you were working through grad school, did is that when you heard about the possibility of working in museums or
Yeah.
historical organizations or art or
Yeah,
okay.
when I was in grad school, what I wanted to do was I wanted to be like my undergrad art history teacher. I thought she had the best job in the world. She taught people about art all day, and then once a year during the summer, she took a class to either Italy, New York, or Paris. And I thought this is perfect. This is the perfect job. That was what I wanted to do. And I I didn't realize at that time that museum jobs were even like a thing. I thought it was like, oh, you had some volunteers or whatever. And maybe like at the big museums, like the Smithsonian or something, those people are probably trained, but it's just like volunteer world for the rest of it. And I did not realize that you could have a profession as a museum professional, and that's kind of where I discovered it. I think it was probably my second year of grad school.
Hmm. And so were you thinking, okay, well, here we go, man, this is a career path I can try out or
Yeah.
okay.
I thought it sounds like fun. I had always loved museums. I tell people that I fell in love with museums when I was 4. I can remember.
Or
I remember my parents took me and my brother to the Milwaukee. It was like the Milwaukee Public History Museum or something like that.
okay.
And they had this huge diorama. And they had tons of dioramas, but I just remember they had ones that they had like an ice age one and one with like elephants and one with like lions and tigers and all that kind of stuff. And I thought at 4 years old, I thought that was the coolest thing I had ever seen. And my parents like bought the souvenir book, and I mean, for years until I was like in high school, I would probably flip through that book and look at those, dioramas, because I just thought that was just literally the coolest thing I had ever seen. And so I always went to museums. When I was dating my ex-husband, I remember one of our first dates, they had redone the diorama at the Petroleum Museum in Midland, Texas. And it was, so Midland, Texas used to be the Permian Basin. It used to be all underwater, back in millions of years ago. So they
Okay.
have this diorama where you walked through what it would have looked like with all these strange, like, sea creatures floating around you. And they redid it. And I was like, we have to go, we have to go. And I remember he was like, okay, this is a weird second date, but all right. If that's what you want to do. So, but I just have always loved museums, and the idea that you can get to go work at a museum and you get paid to go visit a place that for me, I would probably go anyway.
Mm.
It just was amazing to me that, I mean, you get to touch things that other people don't get to touch. Like, that to me is the coolest thing, because I'll be like, oh yeah, I touched that one time. You know, I mean, yeah, without gloves. So, but yeah, fun
Yeah.
stuff.
So, how did you end up at the fire museum in Beaumont?
Well, I for about 5 years I worked in Port Arthur, which is 15 miles from Beaumont, and I
Okay.
was the curator at the Museum of the Gulf Coast over there. And I loved that job. To this day, that is probably one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. It
Mm.
was a large museum in size, but we had a small staff, and it covered Gulf Coast history. So I got to meet famous people all the time. I think my third week of work, I met Janis Joplin's sister, because she was there picking up things for, that we had in the Janis Joplin exhibit on loan. And
Wow.
I mean, I just used to get to meet like sports stars and famous musicians and all that kind of stuff. So I loved that job. And then I, kind of got to where I was the curator, and that was all I was going to be. There weren't a lot of places for me to move up or do
Mm.
anything else. And while I loved the job, we had a lot of staff turnover and stuff like that. And so I kind of started looking other places. And the job became open at the fire museum. So I went ahead and applied. My son did not really want to move.
Mm.
So when I got offered this job, it was good, because I didn't have to move. I didn't have to take him out of his school with his friends or anything
Mm.
like that. I could stay, in the area, and I don't know. Maybe a lot of people think, well, that's weird. She stayed someplace for a kid, but um, when I was 12, I met my two best friends in the whole world, and they're still my best friends. And it would have killed me if my parents had taken me away from them, in school, and we had moved. And so
Mm.
I always kind of wanted to give my son that same sort of experience. So I didn't want to uproot him from his friends. He was kind of at that 12-ish age, same age I was. So we
Yeah.
stayed here, and I got this job at the fire museum. It was offered to me, and I have been here ever since. And had to learn all about fire history because I knew nothing.
Oh my word. That's something that a lot of museum professionals will talk about is the idea of having to move around a lot, or the decision not to move around a lot for work. I mean, museum work has taken me all over the place, and you're exactly right. The thought of uprooting, getting a different apartment, or selling a house, um, it isn't like some other professions where, I don't know, I'm an HVAC repair person, and there's 20 different HVAC companies in my area, and
Mhm.
therefore I don't like this one, maybe I can get a job at this one. It just,
Yeah.
Now, museums, there are a lot of museums all over the place, but trying to find the one where it's going to fit for your salary expectations and what your needs are. Um, yeah, a lot of people end up having to move.
Mhm,
You've
mhm.
probably heard that too.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I can honestly say that if it was not for my son, who never complains about anything, looking at me and saying, "I don't want to move," I
Mm,
would have, I would have moved. But and that's why. I mean, because there's a limited, which Beaumont, for its size, we are the museum capital of Texas, so we have more museums per capita than any other place in Texas.
wow.
But that still is like 15 museums or something. It's not like a ton of museums, and uh, there's not a lot of staff turnover and movement once you get up to a more experienced level. So, I mean, I can think of, 3 or 4 museums here in town where their director has been there 25 years.
Hmm.
So, you're not going to get a lot of movement and a lot of being able to, just like, oh, well, I do heating and air. I can go, to this one across the street because I don't like this one over here and this one's offering me more. It actually requires picking up your entire life and moving. I mean, possibly to another state or something like that. Not even just in the same state you're in.
Yeah. So tell me again the organizations in Texas, museum related organizations in Texas you're involved with.
Yeah, the Texas Association of Museums and the Southeast Texas Museum Association. So their Southeast Texas Museum Association is a regional museum association. We are probably the most active regional museum association. It covers a large region, and I mean, as president, I should probably be able to tell you like what exactly it covers, where people who are not in Texas might understand. But I'm like, well, it's from Lufkin down to Galveston area. So, but that is a large section of Texas.
Mm.
It includes the Houston area, past Houston, so like Lake Jackson area, and all the way up as far north as Lufkin and down as far as like Galveston. So it's quite a large area. We have quarterly meetings. Pre-COVID, we would meet in a different spot in the region. Different museums would host us and we'd have speakers and stuff like that. And now during
Mm.
COVID, it's more of a Zoom thing, but still
Yeah.
kind of trying to keep active there. And then I am on the council, just got reelected to council for the Texas Association of Museums. It's my second time on council, and we put on the annual meeting every year and workshops and stuff like that all over the state, and just kind of try to help out museums large and small throughout the state of Texas, and connect them with whatever they need in the museum world. So
Yeah. Putting on an annual meeting a for a place like Texas must be, whew, that must, do you guys rotate it
yeah,
throughout the country there?
yeah. I mean, yeah. So we move it around because Texas is so large. It is difficult. If you live really far out West Texas, and if it's always in East Texas, you're probably not going to get to go very often. So we try to rotate it around. This year it was supposed to be in San Antonio. We have moved to a virtual event. Next year it's going to be in Waco. Then I think, can't remember, maybe Dallas area or something like that. But it's been in Beaumont before. It's been Lubbock up in the Panhandle. I think one of my favorites was actually in El Paso. So that one was a lot of fun.
Mm.
I was not expecting to like that as well as I did, but definitely a lot of fun out there.
Wow. And you got your hand, I mean, you're involved with some of the planning of it and everything, huh?
yeah. Usually, I'm in charge of a couple of the sessions. I was actually supposed to speak at this one, and now that's moved to a virtual event. I think my other speakers I was speaking with are like, we don't want to do a virtual event, so I don't know if we're going to speak or not. But yeah, I was supposed to speak at this last one, so sometimes I'm involved. I've been on the planning committee for when it was in Houston and Beaumont, so
Yeah. I don't know if other museum professionals struggle with this, but for me personally, I know that I serve on the on PA Museums statewide organization, and um, being a director at a site or a curator or educator of museum staff, and then serving at those organizations, you've got so many balls in the air, and it. I mean, I always feel like I could just do so much more, but I just don't. I just, for whatever reason, like I don't know if I don't have the energy or I'm
yeah.
just focused on my own work so much. But those organizations, they're really important, and it's,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, they are, and I totally get that. I feel that like that a lot of times, and sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I'm contributing as much as maybe it's just not as much as I would like to contribute because I get pulled in so many different directions, but I guess they liked me enough to reelect me, so I guess I did something the last 2 years.
The boards at those organizations are pretty good typically because
Yeah.
they're all sort of on the same wavelength in terms of, how a board should act.
Yes. Yes, yes. When you're used to dealing with governing boards and stuff like that, it's like when you're on a board, you're like, I need to be the model board member.
So the fire museum has a board of directors or trustees, or is it?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
It's kind of we are actually run kind of by the city. So, but we do have a board of directors that their main task is to fundraise for the museum. So, um, I am a city employee. I am a civilian employee of the fire department. I fall under the fire marshal's office. They use me as their education sort of arm. So,
Hmm.
uh, I do school programs, that sort of stuff, provide all that for area schools, and so teach stop, drop, and roll and how to get out of a house in case of a fire and that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And then the board that we have, the city takes care of the building. They pay my salary, and they own the majority of our collection. Our fire trucks, stuff like that. The majority of it belongs to the city. A lot of them are still, they were Beaumont fire trucks, and so the city has just retained that ownership of those trucks. They have little city tags on them, like any other, fire truck does. They're part
Hmm.
of fire fleet, so they just don't actually go out to fires. And we so the city kind of takes care of all of that. And then the board's job is to fundraise. So if we want to, maybe install new exhibits, I like to change things up, stuff like that. This building was built in 1927. It's an old fire station. It did not have central air in it, did not have any air conditioning in it. The second floor offices were air conditioned, and that's only because they are fire department offices.
Hmm.
So the downstairs where the museum is was not air conditioned. So like the board raised the money to install air conditioning
Hmm.
downstairs. And then the city said, if you pay to get it installed, we will pay to keep it kept up and we will service it. So that's kind of how that sort of partnership works.
So um, you sort of have two different governing uh, governing authorities that you have to
Yeah, yeah.
make sure, like
It's a nice
that's
little tricky dance to do.
yeah. Like with the budget too, right? I mean, is it mostly a city budget?
um, yes and no.
Okay.
So, the if I want something that I know that the city can provide and add into their budget. Like, I wanted the building painted, the inside painted. It's
Okay.
been years and it starts to peel, paint starts to peel off and it looks kind of terrible. So and it took me, I think, 3 years of adding it to the city budget before they finally, during COVID, when everything was shutting down and nothing was going on, they came out here and painted. It was like, okay, well, now we've got time for the fire museum. So they came
Mm.
out and painted it, you know.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff, the city, I put in the city budget. Things that, like when I have events and I pay for, programming or something like that, most of that comes out of the board's budget, the
Okay.
fire museum's budget. So that's the kind of things that we raise money for, is programming, events, some collection care, some things. If something goes wrong with a truck or something, I just send it down to Fire Fleet and they take care of it. And sometimes they bill me, sometimes they put it under their budget. It's just kind of
Mm.
like if they feel like they have enough money in their budget to replace a water pump or something like that in a truck, they'll just put it under theirs and they don't even bother me with it. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of nice to have a little bit of that flexibility,
Mhm.
even though it's a
Yeah.
juggling act.
Yes.
And there's something to be said about the security of being with a city or a county agency, I guess.
Yes. I was very grateful during the shutdown, because the museum got closed down last March and we didn't reopen till it was about July. And I worked from home most of the time.
Hmm.
And I still got a paycheck and stuff like that because I was a city employee. And I think had I been any other type of employee, it would have been a bigger struggle than it was.
Yeah. Do you, if you were to plan to bring, like, say, an assistant on or an educator or curator or something like that, that has to go through the city?
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, so I've done it a couple of times where I have written a grant and included a salary for an intern.
Okay.
And so a couple of times I've received grants that, you know, that's what I wrote it for and that's what they pay for. I have an intern right now, that I have paid. And then when I ran out of grant money, I was kind of like, Sam, I mean, you can either show up or you don't have to show up. It's up to you. I mean, I can't pay
Mhm.
you anymore. So, but he kind of likes to come hang out. So,
Mm.
but he also got a job with the city. So I think it was ended up being beneficial for him because he applied for a job at one of the libraries and they called me and I gave him a glowing recommendation. So, but yeah, it would have to go pretty much through the city, especially if it was permanent. Um, there have been times where we thought, well, maybe what it would have to be would probably be the board would have to raise the money to offset the cost for an additional employee, and they would pay that money to the city so that the city could pay that employee as a
Mm.
city employee.
Yeah. So, what do you think is, like, if you could pinpoint some of the things at the museum that really engages the public? What do you think those things are? I mean, I would imagine riding a fire truck would be something that everybody wants to try at least once in their
Yeah.
lifetime.
Yeah. I think we have a hands-on truck that's very popular. I
Okay.
would have to say probably our most popular exhibit we have is upstairs, and it is a child-sized two-story house. I say child size, but I can stand up straight in it. I'm 5'2" ish on a good day,
Oh,
but
okay.
I can stand up straight in it. So it's pretty good sized, and we use that house to teach kids how to get out of a house in case of a fire. We have a smoke detector hooked up to it, and we teach them how to crawl out of a house, and if they're upstairs, how to crawl down the stairs backwards. And I get so many, it's been up there since the mid 80s, and I get so many like young adults and teenagers, and they'll be looking around the museum, and you can tell they're looking for something in particular. And then they'll come up to me and they're like, I kind of remember as a kid, there was like a house, I think, in here. They're not quite trusting their memory because they haven't seen it. And I'm like, yeah, it's upstairs. And they so excited, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I loved that when I was little. Can I go up there and look at it?" So when
Huh.
I would first started working here and I would do tours and stuff, I was only taking like smaller kids up in the house. I thought teenagers aren't going to want to, I mean, the steps are like this big, like it's like a tiny little house. And,
Right.
um, most the teenagers are like a good 6, 7 inches taller than I am. So I was like, they're not going to want to go up there. And I think my second group of teenagers, they were like, "Do you still have the house?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's upstairs." And we go see it. I remember coming on my second grade field trip, and so I take everybody up to the house. They love it. That is probably the most requested exhibit we have here at the museum.
Wow. Well, there's probably I'm sort of, familiar with the idea that there are a lot of fire companies that have little displays or little mini museums. It's probably only a handful of fire museums all over that are like, bigger in size like you guys. Are there other places in Texas like fire related history in Texas, or you guys?
Yeah, there is. Houston has a fire museum.
Okay.
It's kind of downtown Houston in an old fire station. San Antonio has a beautiful, large fire museum that's
Hmm.
fairly new. I'd say like maybe the last 5 years or so. I think it's been open, and you could not get a better like location for that museum. Is literally like across the street from the backyard of the Alamo. Like it's you look outside and there's the wall for the Alamo. So
Wow.
like you couldn't have a better location than that.
Yeah.
And that's also, I believe, in an old fire station. Dallas has a couple. They've got a firefighter museum. I think that's the only one I really haven't been to.
Hmm.
Every time I'm up in Dallas, the hours they're open don't seem to work with whatever I'm doing. So,
Hmm.
but I definitely want to get over there someday and check it out.
Yeah. Well, do you have any some wisdom you'd like to pass on to people, working in, could be in Texas museums, emerging museum professionals? Anything you want to plug, anything like that before we have our lightning round?
Um, I mean, I guess just tell people like I tell my son, kind of do what you love, and everything sort of follows behind. I know when he and his friends were talking about, what they want to do when they get out of high school and stuff, and one of his friends was like, "I'm going to be so miserable working in an office," and I was like, "Who said you have to work in an office?" I was like, "You can do anything, like do what you love and just find a job and make it fit for what you love,
Right. Yeah.
And they were like, "Well, that's because you have a cool job. That's why you say that," because they all used to volunteer for me. And my son's like, "I mean, it's true. My mom never works." And I'm like, "I work all the time, but it's just fun work to me. But
Yeah.
I always recommend to people like my intern, he was like, "Hey, do y'all have any," when he first came to me, "Do you have any? I really want to work in museums. I don't know what to do." I was like, "Look, come on. I am always willing to create an internship if I need to for somebody that wants to learn about museums." I wish I had done an internship or something like while I was in grad school, or maybe volunteered a little bit more at a museum. Because then when I started working in the field, I was like, "Oh, it's a lot more than just looking at dioramas all day like I thought it was going to be."
Yeah.
So I think that would have kind of helped me, not feel so freaked out that people expected me to know what I was doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just always tell people, get involved, volunteer, show up to events, and pay attention to how they're put on, and that kind of stuff. And just if that's what you want to do, if that's what you love, I know it can't be easy right now with so many museums being closed,
Right.
um, or whatever. But it also, I mean, might make it an opportunity. if museums are, they've had to trim down their staff or something, and you're interested in working in museums, maybe volunteer or something like that. I will say, and this is my sort of criticism of the museum world. I do not think we pay our professionals enough.
Yeah.
And I also think that unpaid internships are not something that we should be pushing on people.
Mm.
That's why I am using the term more like find a place to volunteer,
Hmm.
because I think unpaid internships tend to favor people who can afford to go unpaid.
Mm.
And I don't think that that is good for the museum community as a whole. So
Yeah.
I really believe in that, we are expected as museum professionals to have a lot of degrees, a lot of education, a lot of experience, and then our salary doesn't really reflect, you know, what
Right.
what we do. So sometimes I get a little upset. My boyfriend, who makes like 3 times what I make, has his, yeah, I got an associate's degree from DeVry University, and I'm
Yeah.
like, shut
Yeah.
up. I wrote a thesis.
Yeah. Yeah. That's and there's incentive for a museum to to do all that they can to pay interns as well, because then there's more skin in the game. I mean, it's
Mhm,
more like
mhm.
we're giving you funds and we expect you to do a meaningful project
Mhm,
for this
mhm.
pay.
Yeah, yeah. And I said that I had in the past wrote grants that for to pay an intern, and I remember I got a grant to replace shelving in my collection from IMLS a couple years ago, and that was the main thing that pushed my grant into being actually awarded, was that I had in there I wanted to pay an intern $15 an hour, one or two interns $15 an hour, and I need X amount of dollars because I think this is how many hours they're going to work on this project. And every single review of that grant that came back said thank you for paying your intern.
Yeah.
So and I didn't want to pay them minimum wage. I felt like $15 an hour was a fair wage, and that I just I feel very strongly about that. I really do.
Yeah. And I think it's okay too to reach out to the local college or university and
Mhm.
say, look, do you have a work program where
Yeah.
that we can pay these students to do this work? And a lot of colleges have
Mhm.
programs like that.
Yeah, yeah. And I've a few summers we used to get student from ExxonMobil, and Exxon actually paid them. And
Mm.
but they would come and they would learn about museums, and they would work for me, for the whole summer. I don't know what Exxon paid them. I'm assuming it was fairly decent. They were mostly like, seniors in high school or freshmen in college or something like that. So they were pretty young. But and they actually worked full-time jobs. I mean, they were here 40 hours a week the whole summer, and
Wow.
Exxon paid them. So just programs like that, I think, can be helpful. And that's probably one of the big criticisms I have about this field, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, it's from what I've been hearing, it's starting to shift a little bit. Not
Yes.
maybe not the pay thing,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
internship thing
Yeah,
is.
but I will say, being on TAM council this last year, TAM never required when museums listed jobs on our site
Right.
to list the salary,
Yeah.
and we took a vote and we discussed it, and we decided to require all museums that when they list a job on the TAM website now they have to list the salary. And I think that sort of transparency is good. I think, I mean, I remember when I just got out of grad school, and, I was applying for all sorts of jobs. And I remember I had one museum that called me and they were discussing a job with me. And I asked them how much they paid. And they told me, and I said, I'm going to stop you right there, and I'm not going to waste your time because I have a minimum I have to make, and I can't live off of that. And I was like, I'm a single parent, and they got a little offended, but I didn't want to waste their time and go, or mine, and go on an interview and all this kind of stuff, and then be offered. I think they were paying 25,000 for a full-time job. So I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it with my bills. So I really think that that sort of transparency uh, helps people, and it helps the industry and the profession, and you can see what other jobs are paying in the field, that and what sort of requirements they have for that pay. And I also think it keeps museums from kind of lowballing professionals.
Yeah. I'm, at least at this point in my life, I'm okay. I'm okay with the range thing,
Mm-hmm.
as long as it's not like $20,000 to $50,000
Yeah,
range.
yeah,
Like, as long as it's within
yeah.
reason, I'm okay.
Yeah, give me a $10,000 to $15,000 range to work with, and I'm like, okay, yeah, because less experience, you're at the lower end. More experience, you should be more toward the middle, higher end.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you're giving like a $50,000 discrepancy, yeah, that's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
That means nothing. You're just putting numbers out there at that point.
Yeah. Yep. And I'm sensitive too to the politics of posting a salary for a, when your other staff are going to be seeing that.
Yeah.
And you might have a philosophy of, well, okay, we're being transparent. It doesn't matter. But
Mm-hmm.
still, there could be particular situations where it just isn't the right thing to do, to let everybody know that this is the exact salary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, yeah, I'm glad we got into that a little bit.
That's
Yeah.
my little soapbox for the day.
Yeah. And if you figure out how to get those salaries up, you definitely send me an email.
Look, when I figure it out, I'll be the first to let you know.
Yeah. All right. So Ami, you ready for the lightning round?
Sure.
Okay. These are tough questions.
Okay.
So you have to choose. Would you like to be wined and dined or have breakfast in bed?
Wines and dines.
Whoa. Okay.
I'm not a morning person.
All right. So if your partner listens to this, they better get on the ball.
He knows I'm not a morning person.
It's your birthday and you're forced to do one of these games: pin the tail on the donkey or hit a pinata.
Get a pinata. You get candy with that one.
Yeah, pin the tail on the donkey just makes you look like a you know what.
Yep.
And then so you have the option. You have a crew that comes as a gift, and they're you're gonna get them to clean your house or clean your car.
Ooh, house. They can do laundry and mop.
Some people's car needs a whole crew.
Yeah, mine's not quite that bad.
This has been a lot of fun.
I enjoyed it. It was good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. And if there's anyone in Texas that you feel like, you know what, I think they would be good to chat with Jason on his podcast, just drop me a line and I'll reach out to him, and you can tell him how it went.
I will do that for sure.
Yeah. All right, Ami, thank you for your thoughts today, and I'll check in with you another time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.